When we go about defining intellectual disability, it is basically the limitations of the intellect of that individual, which is characterized by the lack of reasoning, by the lack of problem solving in that particular individual, as well as the limitations of the adaptive behavior, which basically includes cooking, cleaning, budgeting, shopping. All of these activities are basically included in the adaptive functioning of a particular individual. So all of these are basically adaptive. All of these are affected in this particular individual who is suffering from the intellectual disability. Talking about the impaired intellectual functioning, it's again very important. How do we go about defining this intellectual functioning? Basically, we are considering the cognitive behavior of that individual, we are considering the antisocial behavior of that particular individual, as well as the lack of the adaptive functioning in that particular patient that we're talking about. A lot of researches have been carried out on the intellectual dysfunctioning of that particular individual that we talk about. But the risk factors, they basically go about the environmental factors as well as the parental factors, then the factors that are related to the child himself or herself. Then the environmental conditions, they also contribute towards the mental retardation or the low IQ, which is basically defined by the 2 standard deviations from the mean. So we'll basically observe a low IQ in this particular individual, as well as the adaptive functioning will be affected. Now, what are the causes that basically lead to this low IQ and the lack of the adaptive functioning? It can be basically the perinatal causes. It can be the causes that are related to the intrauterine life, as well as the causes that are present in the environment of that child. The infancy period is particularly important when we talk about this mental retardation. Any history of child abuse, any adverse life reaction in his or her life, any history of sexual abuse would contribute towards the intellectual disability of the individual. As well as we have to consider the genetic states. Basically, the mental retardation, the low IQs, they run in the families of the individuals. Even the high IQs, they run in the families of a lot of individuals. So basically, we have a family who is smart enough, or we have a family whose IQ is low on the other hand. So all of these, we can relate them to even the genetics that are involved, and they play a pivotal role in the intellectual functioning of a particular individual that we talk about. Now, when we say intellectual disability, it is a neuropsychological measure of general intellectual measure. So this is basically the neuropsychological conditions that we are considering, and that are going to basically contribute towards that low IQ and lack in adaptive functioning, including the inability to solve problems. So even the day-to-day problems cannot be solved by that individual. The abstract thinking is observed in a lot of individuals. The lack of problem solving is also observed along with it, and they basically acquire the new learning skills in this particular state. So this is the basically state of this patient who is suffering from the intellectual disability. There's going to be an abstract thinking. Along with it, the problem-solving behavior as well as the adaptive functions are going to be lacking in this particular patient that we're talking about. And we're labeling this patient as an intellectual disabled patient. The causes, they can relate from the intrauterine causes, and they are basically the chromosomal abnormalities, and along with that we have the gene mutations. So gene mutations, basically they refer to the gene deletions as well as the additional factors of the gene. That is basically the enhancement of the genes is sometimes noted down in a lot of cases. So the perinatal causes are again very important in a lot of conditions. Breech or high forceps delivery, they are sometimes related to the mental retardate cases. Then we have the perinatal asphyxia. That is again going to lead to an asphyxiating condition of the brain, which is going to result in the low IQ. Obviously, that is basically going to result due to the fact that the brain damage has occurred due to the asphyxiation process. The early life of the individual has to be assessed in a particular way. The infections that may basically encompass the toxoplasmosis, the sexually transmitted diseases, rubella, mumps, measles, all of them are sometimes related. A lot of studies even have been carried out on all of these infections that can be related to the mental retardation or intellectual disabilities. The injury is again very important. A lot of poisons can basically cross the blood-brain barrier and they can affect the intellect of the individual. The metabolic disturbances, they can again result in the intellectual disability. So if we have a broader view of all of these causes, it's basically ranging from the intrauterine, the perinatal period, and then the early life, which is usually the period of infancy. The causes are multiple, basically, ranging from the genetic, the infections, the trauma, or the emotional trauma that the person has gone through can result in the mental retardation of the individual. The genetic abnormalities that can be related to the intellectual disabilities are the Down syndrome. Now, the kids with the Down syndromes, they have basically multiple factors involved. Even their cardiovascular system, their respiratory system is involved, and they basically have the mentally retarded individuals. Then we have even the Fragile X syndrome, and we should know basically how to distinguish these kids of Down syndrome from these Fragile X syndromes. They have their particular facial characteristics, and that is basically going to be helpful in distinguishing between these two syndromes out here. And all of these syndromes are basically related to a low IQ, and a lack of adaptive functioning is also seen as all of these syndromes. Then we have the point mutations, deletions, and even the gene duplication is one of the causes that can result in the mental retardation, low IQ, and again, the adaptive functioning is affected as well. Talking about the risk factors over here, we can have the causes divided into the genetic causes first of all, then we have the intrauterine, and then we have the perinatal causes. Talking about the genetic causes, it can be the single gene disorder. It can be the X-linked single gene disorder, such as an example, one of them is the Fragile X syndrome. Then we have the autosomal dominant disorder. The example is the tuberous sclerosis over here. We have the chromosomal disorder, which can result in the Down syndrome. We have the imprinted gene disorder, which can result in the Prader-Willi syndrome. And then we have the unknown but strongly heritable characteristic seen, which is basically resulting in the autism spectrum conditions. So when we talk about the autism spectrum conditions, the cause is basically the etiology is basically unknown in these cases, but it is strongly heritable. Now, talking about the intrauterine causes, it can be the infections, as we've already emphasized upon, and then we have the toxins as well. Talking about the toxins, such as alcohol can result in the fetal alcohol syndrome, and then we have infections such as rubella, measles, mumps, toxoplasmosis. All of these can result in the mental retardation of the child as well. Talking about the perinatal causes, we have hypoxia, cerebral palsy is going to result in such a case. Brain damage in infancy is going to result in the meningitis, as well as brain tumors conditions can result after this. And then we have the environmental causes in infancy, such as extreme deprivation, parental separation, and all of this deprivation or the depression and separation anxiety is going to result in a low IQ and an anxious child as well. So over here, we discuss the impaired intellectual disability in a particular individual or in a particular patient, what can be the risk factors, as well as the causative factors of this condition are also discussed in this section. So that is the end of this section. Thank you for watching sqadia.com.